following is a production of the University of Minnesota.
I'm Christopher James, and I'm the chair of the Communicators Forum this year, so thank you all for being here on behalf of the forum. And I'm also the Communications and Events Director at the Weitzman Art Museum. And so I'm going to talk to you about designing events that meet specific communications goals. And wanted to talk about that in the context of a case study, one particular event series that's new at the Weitzman that we created, and we created it to meet a specific need. We had sort of a problem, a gap in our communications, and so we decided an event was the best way to address that need. So I'm going to share that with you. So I'll talk about all the phases of coming up with that new event series, from audience research at the front end, finding out about our audiences and what they wanted, identifying this problem, this gap that we wanted to address, and then designing the event itself, executing it, and assessing it. So I recognize that this particular event that I'm talking about is probably very different from the kinds of events that you're doing and creating within your units. But I think that when you're thinking about meeting communications goals with events, there's a set of kind of guiding principles that apply no matter what the style or scale of the event is. I think a successful event addresses an identified problem or need, fulfills some goals that have been defined at the outset, and is well designed and well put together, and can be assessed and evaluated at the end. And in some ways, I think about events being just like any other communications tool that you might employ. So in some ways, it's sort of equivalent to deciding to place an ad, or place a story in a publication, or do an email campaign, in terms of reaching a specific audience in a targeted way to get them to do something. Events can do that. But they're also really different from any of those other strategies, and I'll talk about those key differences too, because it's something important to keep in mind. Just really quickly, you're probably somewhat familiar with the Weitzman, but just some quick background on the museum. We're the university's art museum. We have about 20,000 objects in our collection, and people sometimes think that we're a contemporary museum because of our building, but actually we have 12th century ceramics and 19th century Asian furniture and a whole bunch of other things in our collection. So, so the collection and the building don't totally go together. We serve the campus community, but also the general public, and broadly speaking, we have a sort of 50-50 split between visitors from students, faculty, and staff, and then from the larger community. We do 3 or 4 major exhibitions each year, and then several other smaller ones, and we offer 10 to 12 public programs each year that relate to our shows. So with this situation, this event that we created, we started with a market research project. And that's how we knew that we had this gap. It was 2008, and we hadn't done a really good study of our audiences at the Weitzman since 1999. So it had been a really long time since we had taken a comprehensive look at who was coming, what do we know about them, what are their impressions of us, what are their experiences with us, what do they want us to be doing more of, less of. We really didn't know. So we designed a program that gathered demographic and qualitative information from all our audiences, so from our members, from the campus community, from the general public, from the tourist market, from all the different groups that come to the Weitzman. We did a combination of surveys and in-person interviews, exit interviews with our visitors. We sent about 6,200 web surveys out to our audiences, and we had about a 40% response rate, so a really good response rate on that survey, and it gave us a lot of information. And then we did about 400 interviews as people left the museum over the course of a few months. So between those two things, we got some really good information about demographics, their past experiences with us, and also just more general kind of lifestyle information about them. And here was one key thing that we found. When we took the responses and sorted them into age segments, there was a notable finding in the 18 to 34-year-old age segment, which is a really important one for us because we're a university art museum serving, tens of thousands of students, and so this is a key segment for us. But what we found was, when we asked them how many times they were coming to the Weitzman per year, it was lower than all other age segments, and the average was less than 1 time per year. So that was an alarming finding, not what we wanted to hear. We also asked this group, among many other things, we asked them, what other activities do you engage in your spare time? What do you like to do when you're not at work or in class? And the thing that came up highest, that rated highest with this particular age segment was music, live music in sort of the pop rock vein, not the classical side. So that's something they told us they were doing in their spare time. So then we had our problem sort of defined. They were under-attending. We needed to attract them in some kind of a way that matched their affinities, and it needed to fit with the Weitzman's mission. So we couldn't just become a nightclub. We had to figure out a way to sort of wrap that into who we were. So we made the decision that an event was the right way to do that. And these were some of the things we wanted to do. We wanted to create an event series that would attract this target audience, and then once we knew who they were, invite them back to other sorts of things at the Weitzman. We wanted it to match their affinities and interests. We knew from looking around at our peer institutions, other art museums, that lots of museums across the country have some kind of a late night program that's sort of pitched at this age demographic, or a live music series, or a combination of the two. So we started to think about, could we have some sort of late night event series that pairs live music with the art on view in the galleries, and have the music be the draw because they told us they were into that, but somehow tie it to the gallery experience so that it was integrated with what we were doing elsewhere in the museum. So we started gathering input. Because this was a new series, we wanted to consult really broadly with lots of people, so we asked some students that were in our museum studies class what they thought. We had some focus groups with people from this age demographic and asked them what they thought. We asked people who were doing similar events at other museums what their experiences had been like. Looked at published literature. There's actually a lot of published journal articles about art museums that do late night music series. I was surprised at how much there was, but we found out some potential pitfalls that way. We went to the library, we did a literature search, and they said, vibrations from live music can shake the pigment off of charcoal drawings, so be careful for that. Or, if people come and have too much to drink, they can knock into a painting and damage it. So good to get some sort of some of that stuff in our mind before we dove in and did it. These were the goals that we set up for ourselves. We wanted to build our young adult audience with programming that matched their interest, enhance their experiences with our exhibitions by presenting a music performance that was tied to the work on view, draw people who had never been there before to come and make it really exciting and fun for them, and then make sure that the programming was accessible and appealing for students. So these were sort of the 4 defined goals that we had for this event. We decided, then we also set up some measurements of success. So how are we going to assess this at the end? How will we know if we've been successful? We decided that each time we did one of these late night music events, if we had at least 300 people attending, that was a sign of success. 2/3 of the audience we wanted to be in the age demographic. So that was going to be a measure of success. 15% brand new to the Weitzman. And 1/4 of them students. So those were the 4 sort of things that we said, if we can do this, we'll have been successful. Oh, and then this one was sort of repeat attendance. So after we've done a second and a third and a fourth, we wanted a percentage of the audience to be coming back for more. So we decided to offer this series 3 times a year in conjunction with each major exhibition we were doing. Some just details of it: doors at 9, music around 10, it ends at 1 in the morning, so it's a late night gig. We added some extra kind of activities to make it more fun and also get people circulating around the museum so they weren't just showing up, watching a band play and leaving. So we got sponsorship from Samsung, actually, and they donated a bunch of video screens to us, and we had this video game lounge that was in one room of the museum, which was sort of cool. And then at midnight after the show, we had an artist lead a tour of the exhibition and help explain the connection between the music that they had just heard and the art that was up in the galleries. It was a ticketed event with an admission fee, so people bought tickets in advance. We got sponsorship from some media partners and some in-kind donations. I mentioned Samsung. We also got wine and beer donated, and the food was donated, so that helped. We designed a budget, which is a whole presentation in and of itself, so I won't go into that too much. We knew we wanted to tie the band to the art. The show that we had up last winter when we did this was a collection of minimalist and contemporary art that had been built by this couple in New York, Dorothy and Herbert Vogel. And so we started thinking about how to tie a band to that, and it was really hard because what's a minimalist band or a conceptual band? That wasn't offering a lot of ideas to us. So we decided that we would focus on the married couple aspect. The Vogels were, you know, they had a romantic relationship, but they also had a creative relationship where they really built this incredible collection together. And so we got really interested in, you know, what's it like to collaborate with somebody that you're also married to. And so we booked the band Mates of State, which some of you may be familiar with. They're also a married couple and have a lot to say about how that relationship works when they make music together. So that was the connection there. We sold out the event 2 weeks before it happened, so that first measure of success was done 2 weeks before we even had it, which was really cool. And we did this, it was mostly Mates of State was the draw, but really we didn't spend very much money to promote it. We did some advertising, but that was pretty much free because we had media sponsors, City Pages and Radio K, offering some free promotion for this. And then the rest of it was done through email and Facebook and Twitter. And 360 seats were sold. So here's something to really, really remember, though, with events. And this is, I think, one of the key ways that events are really different from placing an ad or doing media relations to communicate with audiences. They're a ton of work, right? And so if you're going to do it, you got to be aware that it's gonna take a lot more investment of human resources than traditional like advertising would. Some of the things we were dealing with, you know, signage at the event, catering, bartenders, volunteers, linens, lights, video games, a visiting artist from New York, a live Twitter feed on the wall, vendors coming by to drop off product, tickets, comps, hiring all the backline equipment. You know, I mean, it just went on and on and on. And so the point there is just consider that carefully before deciding that an event is the right way to get at your audience. We were able to gather a lot of information from the audience, which was really helpful. We knew who they all were and how to contact them because they bought tickets. Also, we did kind of a name capture situation at the event where fill out this form and we'll enter you in a drawing for a prize. And on that little form, which almost everybody filled out, we got their contact information, but we also asked how old they were, and we asked if they had been to the Weitzman before. And that was really helpful later on to do some assessment. Here's just some photos from the event. So there's the band singing away. A shot of the crowd, another shot of the crowd. So you can see just even from this picture that the age demographic we wanted was what we got. There's the video game lounge. And these guys were the DJs that played before the band started. They're students. So here's how the statistics we got from that name capture exercise played against our original goals. 81% of the people who were there were 18 to 34. We had said we wanted 2/3, so that was good. Third of them were first timers. So we said we wanted 25%, so that was good. Another 27% had been to the Weitzman before, but it had been at least 2 years. So we got some people back, which was really cool. And a third of them were students. So those were some really encouraging numbers to see. Just some lessons learned, consulting broadly really helped as we were designing the event, because we checked in with all those different constituencies. The event design went through about 5 different phases and really changed a lot before we did it. Ask people who are like the people you want to attract to your event. Kind of seems obvious, but really important, because they'll tell you really good things to do and not do. Researching those potential pitfalls, like the charcoal shaking off the drawing thing, it was really good to be prepared for some of those risks. And risks to work of art is something that we worry about a lot at the museum, so we were ready for that. I've mentioned this already. Events are labor intensive, so always asking yourself, is there another approach we could do instead that wouldn't take as much of our time and work? If so, maybe do it. If not, events are great. They just take a lot of work. Know that need in advance. What need is your event addressing? So don't just sort of leap into the breach and throw a party because it's fun. Really structuring it around meeting a need is important. And then set those goals in advance and take a look at them afterward. And I think that's all I got. So thanks for listening.
Thanks, guys. We're going to have Q&A, and Pamela is going around and collecting those cards. And in the meantime, while we're waiting for those cards to come up, I had a question. Sheila, I was going to ask you a question. Do you mind picking this thing up again? Thanks. Okay. I was just going to ask you about the measurement after your event, how you go about gathering whether you've been successful.
Well, the success is...
Oops, maybe it switched off. There.
Hello. Success is determined in a number of ways. One is, did our legislative goal actually occur? And we won't know that generally till session's over. But this year the movement happened right away, so it was obvious that it had had an effect.
And what was that? How did you see it?
Both the House and Senate committees that have jurisdiction over the arts passed bills to reduce the cuts. The House reduced the cut to a 3% cut the first year and a 3% cut the second year, and the Senate reduced the cuts to 3% and 5%, and which are both within that average cut to state agencies that we had requested between 3 and 6%.
Yeah.
So absolutely, that was a success. But we do a lot of statistical analysis of attendees. There are 201 legislators, so one of the questions is what percentage of the legislature did we have an actual constituent meet with their own legislator? And so we watched that over time. The other analysis is we have a set of target legislators, I didn't really get into that, who are part of the committees that determine. And so we do a lot of targeted work in their districts to boost the numbers for those targeted legislators. So how many bodies for each of the targeted legislators did we get? And stuff like that. We do a lot of numerical analysis.
Great. Thank you. Questions for him. But I do have one for Mary. What percentage of your time do you or your staff spend with alumni and student volunteers to train them on the event? I think that's the golf event, probably, or maybe it's the classes with quizzes.
Very little, and with the classes without quizzes event, we have a brief training about half an hour before the event starts when people arrive early, just to give them more specifics about their assignments, provide the bios for introductions, and so that's very limited. Also, same with the golf scramble, right at the event prior to when the golf scramble begins. So we don't spend very much time at all in training, and I learned a lot from the first speaker that I want to incorporate in some of the things that we do in terms of training volunteers and grassroots preparation.
And what about throughout the year? How much time do you spend on planning events then in your job?
There in CFANS, we have 3 of us that work in alumni relations. My position is alumni and constituent relations, and to me that means we have I'm envious of the dental school when they work with the dentist and that's it. We have the pork producers and the tree people and the food people, and so we've got a lot of different constituent groups that we work with. So in terms of the Alumni Society, I would say about specifically a quarter of my time, and then we have an assistant director that works primarily with the student engagement programs, both undergrad, grad students, and career development, and then a staff assistant that works with our unit and a couple of others too.
Okay, well, this question is for anyone. What are some smaller events that would be good to start with when beginning an alumni group? I think that's the question, if I'm reading this correctly. Yeah, so that would be you.
Well, I think that Christopher was talking about talking to the audience and finding out what it is that they want and what it is that they need. So I think it depends on, when you look at the alumni population, anywhere from recent grads, students that just graduated a year ago, to alums that are approaching their 50-year reunion, it really varies. So it depends on what group you really want to target. One of the events that we've done that has been relatively simple to plan and has been really cool, but will probably be cut because of budget cuts this year, is the St. Paul campus reunion that we hold at the Arboretum. It still is a lot of work, but it's mostly check off the list. Reserve the room, order the food, get the tour set up, do the registration. We do all of our registration in-house just for cost-saving purposes, so Holly, our staff colleague, does a lot of the processing checks. And at the moment, but I'm hoping this is going to change, we only use payment by check. So hopefully with the Alumni Association's new web tool, we'll be able to do some credit card payments. But that's a real simple couple-hour event. We bring in a speaker, and alums love seeing each other and hearing the speaker. The students, we did have for a while something called First Thursday Networking. It was a ripoff from the Carlson School, First Friday Networking. Ours wasn't quite as successful because I think Carlson students really realized the value of making connections, where our students maybe didn't see that quite as much. But we would have anywhere from 20 to 40 students, recent grads I should say, and maybe seniors that would get together on a Thursday just to socialize and network. And the great thing about that was it was the volunteer that chose the location, that brought their friends, that did the, you bring 10 friends and so on and so on. That was relatively simple as well.
And Mary, I wanted to follow up with you on measuring your success. I noticed that among your goals you didn't mention money, but there must be some financial goals for behind reaching all the alumni and engaging them, at least to cover your costs for doing all this.
Absolutely. Specifically, we haven't thought about it in those terms, but most of our events we try to make as close to break even as possible. I mentioned the golf scramble. We donate a few items for the silent auction, but nothing comes out of our operating budget to manage the golf scramble, and the primary financial goal there is to raise funds for scholarships. That's the only real fundraising effort that we do, and that's what I love about my job. I work really closely with the development staff in fundraising, but we're in the business of friend raising, or focusing on the time and talent versus the treasure. And so financial goals are really about keeping costs low, identifying sponsors to help support the cost of the event, and that's a place where I expect we're going to be spending a lot more time in the next couple of years. In fact, we just had a meeting with an alum board member this week talking about how do we put together that sheet of, people say, the alums will say, well, we need to raise more money. Okay, but for what? What is the purpose? What do we need to apply it to? So we're putting that sheet together of what are the events that we could do, we should do, what's the benefit to the potential sponsor, why would they care, and focusing a lot more on raising funds to break even, and possibly then if we made any profit that would go back into scholarships.
Thank you. I have a question for Sheila, and this is our last question that I have here, so if you do have another question you want to pass forward, please do so. But Sheila, how do you keep it fresh, and how do you keep people coming back year after year?
Well, the political environment keeps it fresh for us. There are always new threats and different political players on the stage that try to attack us with a different cudgel each time. And so the attendees come for basically two reasons. One, because their job depends on the funding. So everybody's there motivated out of some sort of personal reason, that they work in an arts organization and the funding funds their job, or they have a internal sort of religious fervor for the arts, and being a part of Arts Advocacy Day serves their personal identity. So that's something I don't need to refresh. They're all internally motivated to be a part of this.
You just need to tap into it.
So you need to tap into it by giving them the connection between their personal internal motivation and the event, and what the emotional connection is for them between being there and being part of it. It's the best networking opportunity of the year. 500 people who work in the arts in every genre you can imagine, from choral music to museums to individual painters, people who work in churches as organists. I mean, just the variety of people who work in or participate in or personally produce art is vast. But a lot of these people work alone, or they're in their own silo in terms of they only ever talk to museum people. They only ever talk to other vocalists. And here they're in an auditorium of 500 people who believe with the same fervor that they do that the arts make the world a better place. And that's a very empowering thing for them. And so my job is just to remind them about that connection and the goals of our organization and get them together so they can enjoy that.